Hey everyone, I'm Scott Stokely, and this video is going to be all about how to avoid the first hole jitters at tournaments. Now, before I give you the cool tip, if you're interested in my teaching, go to scottstokely.net. You can read about my upcoming full-day seminars, my 2-hour clinics, even my 6-month online Become a Complete Disc Golfer class, scottstokely.net. All right, how to avoid first hole jitters. And I'm gonna give you the tip, but first I gotta tell you a story. If you follow me, you may have heard this before, but it's one of my favorite stories because a player came up to me one time and they said, "You gotta help me out. I always bogey the first couple holes at a tournament. I get to the first hole and I'm always nervous. I got the worst case of first hole jitters ever." And I said, "All right, well, tell me what you do." And he said, "All right, so I got this book on sports psychology," metaphorical eye roll, "but I got this book on sports psychology and it gave me a bunch of tips to avoid the first hole jitters." And by the way, I'm rolling my eyes because if the book worked, he wouldn't have been asking a Frisbee golfer who dropped out of high school for advice. But he says, first hole of the tournaments when I hear the 2-minute warning, meaning I have 2 minutes to tee off. The first thing I do is I walk off by myself. And then I close my eyes. And the book gave me this great tip. It said, when you close your eyes, try to visualize an imaginary line from this side of your head to this side. Another line from the front to the back, and another line from the top to the bottom. And what the book said to do, I close my eyes, and the 3 lines aren't touching inside my head. So I mentally try to move these lines around. And when they finally all converge, that means I'm centered. By the way, I've still yet to figure out what centered means in terms of disc golf psychology, but that's what the book says. So the book says, that means you're centered. So then I open my eyes. I take 3 deep breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And then I walk over to the first hole. I got the worst case of first hole jitters. And I said, yeah, of course you do. I said, so let me paraphrase what the book just said to do. First thing you need to do, go isolate yourself from all your friends. Second thing you need to do is you need to do a trick. You need to do mental gymnastics because this is a disc golf tournament. It's a big deal. It's so big and massive and important that you can't just play the game. You got to do a mental trick in order to be able to play. And not only that, this tournament is such a big deal that you can't even breathe properly. You know that thing that you've been doing your entire life without thinking about? All of a sudden, you can't breathe because you're about to tee off a Frisbee golf hole. So you have to be taught how to breathe. Let me ask you a question. Do you get nervous at league night or when you play with your buddies? And he's like, well, no. I said, do you do any of that stuff before you tee off at league night? He says, of course not. So that's the trick. If there's a scenario where you don't get first hole jitters, which for most players is sometimes, whether it's with your buddies or when you play by yourself, doesn't matter. But instead of changing things because you're at a tournament, which effectively, this wonderful book on sports psychology said to make the tournament bigger than a normal round of disc golf. Instead, try to replicate what you do when you're not nervous. So I asked him, I said, when you're at league night, what do you do right before you tee off? He says, well, the first thing I always do is I text my kids and tell them to do their homework. And I said, perfect. So before you tee off at a tournament, text your kids. I said, do you isolate from your friends at league night? He's like, no, I hang out with my buddies. Okay, well then hang out with your group. Don't change something that was working into a scenario that doesn't work. Replicate what you do that's most effective at the tournament. And it's not that you won't get first hole jitters, but they're gonna be a lot less. Thanks everyone.